Thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge the work of the member for Grey and again support the comments that he's made about how important this particular inquiry is. Also to acknowledge the work of our chair, the member for Groom, Dr McVeigh, and the deputy chair, member for Patterson, Ms Swanson. But I'd also like to put on record the support of the Prime Minister for this particular inquiry and acknowledge his support for it. As a committee, we have a really important task to look at best practice approach to regional development, to look at the decentralisation of Commonwealth agencies and the action that the Commonwealth can take to encourage greater corporate decentralisation. And just before I get underway with my speech, I'd just like to acknowledge to the Deputy Speaker my colleagues in the Speakers Gallery, I think it's called today, my constituents, particularly Phil and Sam, thank you for coming, and also Claudia and Mirren, whom I'm going to refer to in my speech. My constituents, I'm really glad to have you here, so thank you for coming. So in my speech today, I want to talk a little bit about the terms of reference of the inquiry. I want to talk about one particular case study in the issues paper, which we're addressing, but I want to particularly stress that there are only 10 more days for submissions to come in. So it's a call to action to the people in my community and all around Australia, I welcome the member for Durack, to get your skates on, because we need your input. And if you want to appear before the inquiry, as we travel around Australia, you've got to put a submission in. So I just need to say a submission is a fancy word for a letter. And the letter has to have 3 things in it. It actually has to describe what your issue is. It has to be addressed to the right people, so you've got to get those details right. And importantly, it has to have a recommendation telling us what you think needs to be done. So if I could begin with a bit of the problem, why do we need this? That for too long, I believe that region Australia has been governed by policy silos that are disjointed and not connected. And this, we've been already hearing it today in this place about this one size fits everybody. And I know it's really hard for people in the city to actually understand that the country is different, that we're not all homogeneous, we're not all the same. And that if we're going to do good policy implementation, you've actually got to recognise regional and social differences. And that's been hard for government to do. So this whole problem we've faced of trying to say to a government that's got to look after 2/3 of the landmass of Australia, you've got to pay attention to the people who live there because they understand. We call this place-based planning. And I know it's really hard for the people in the cities to actually understand that we in the country get it and we know how to do it and we know what's good for our community. So you've got to engage with people and particularly local knowledge. So the member for Grey talked about connectivity and connectiveness. So it's not only about physical connectivity, mobile phone coverage, NBN, public transport that works. It's actually about how you bring people together at the micro level in a community, at a local government level, at a regional level, at a state level, and then at a Commonwealth level. And that takes quite a bit of an art because you've got to break out of your silos, which are often issues-based, and you've got to come together around a region. So that's been a challenge, and I don't think we've done it really well in the past, and I'm optimistic with this inquiry we'll do it better. So, as my colleagues in the House to know, that regional Australia constitutes or contributes 1/3 of our national output, and it's home to something like 8.8 million Australians. It provides major jobs for people. It's a formidable contributor to the national economy. So, what I'm hoping with this inquiry is that not only do we take what we know that works, that we actually do the planning and position ourselves, so where does regional Australia position exist in the future? So it's a really, really important inquiry and we need to do it well. So when I say put a submission in, so to my people in my electorate and to people in regional Australia, I'm saying we're basically looking for 3 things. What's working, what could work better, and what role can the Commonwealth play to bring it together? So in the issues paper, the terms of reference are there. We talk about best practice. How do you grow the population base? How can you share opportunity? How can we develop the capacity of regional Australia? What's the role for leadership? What's the role for education? How do we grow and diversify our economic base? But how do we have a vibrant, cohesive and engaged regional communities? So it's not just about infrastructure, it's not just about decentralising departments. We're looking at vibrant, cohesive and engaged communities. So how do we actually get people to know that they've got a real stake in the future? And the other area of the terms of reference that I'd like to speak about, and given my background in business and my absolute love for small business in regional Australia, Section C of the terms of reference talks about the role that the Commonwealth's got in supporting corporate decentralisation. And I just want to pick up on a couple of the terms because I'm really going to be advocating hard in my community to get submissions on this, but also in the committee. What do we have to do to encourage early stage equity or debt finance to support startups and established businesses in the region? We need to examine access to capital for regional businesses, including agribusiness, manufacturing and technology. And we need to consider the adequacy of businesses in their access to early stage accelerators or incubators, including access to business mentors, business networks and capital. So it's not just about decentralisation of government departments, it's how do we grow the capacity, how do we retain skilled labour, and how do we leverage strong transport and communication connectivity. So it's a great issues paper and I'd really like to support or acknowledge the work of the Secretariat in putting it together. Good job, team. But I'd like to spend some time talking about best case practice from a really personal experience of mine. So I grew up in the area of Albury Wodonga, which we've been talking about today was part of the Whitlam years. Albury Wodonga supports, it's a regional capital, but it supports an area of 180,000 people. So it's a really important part of our Australian sector. Albury Wodonga is one of the largest, fastest growing single regional inland communities. It's got about 8,000 local businesses, and the gross regional product is valued at about $5.9 billion. So at a local level, really significant. The major income streams in Albury Wodonga are rental, hiring and real estate services at 14.4%, public administration and safety 13.4%, and I'm really proud to say that 13.1% is manufacturing, and manufacturing is growing, unlike other areas of regional Australia where it's falling off. In Albury Wodonga, we've got a really strong manufacturing base, and it does a terrific job. Now, one of the reasons why Albury Wodonga is going so well is because of the Whitlam era, but it wasn't only Whitlam. That was really good, but we had bipartisan support. So when Mr Whitlam's period of government ended, we had Malcolm Fraser come in, and he picked it up and he absolutely supported what we were doing in regional development. And we need that. If we're going to have long-term sustainable development, we've got to have bipartisan support. We can't have both sides of parliament bickering. So it's really important in this committee that we come up with a bipartisan report, because we've got to then go to government and say, here's the collective agreement and the best knowledge. So there's a few things that I just want to point out about Albury Wodonga that absolutely work. Welcome, Deputy Chair. Good to have you here. We've got TAFEs, we've got universities, so we grow our own workforce, which is really important. We've got really good health services. We have fantastic local businesses, and I've referred to manufacturing. We're surrounded by really careful planning around our environment. So we've got superbly treed and landscaped hillscapes. We've got parks, we've got bikeways which look round our creek areas. And it's because the community was designed and it was really well created by people who cared. So we know how to do it. 40 years ago, we began doing it really well. So the task for you guys, and particularly to my constituents here today, to say in the next 40 years, what do you want in Albury Wodonga? And how can you contribute to this inquiry? And so I want to particularly call out to the young people of North East Victoria. Get your thinking caps on and make a submission through the North East SAY little competition that's going. Put your ideas together, because we can do this for the future, but we really need your young creative minds and your creativity if we're actually going to do it well. So I'm really wanting my community to get hold of this issues paper, to pay attention to it. You've only got 10 days. I'm keen for you to actually present to the committee, but you need to put a submission in if you're going to have your opportunity in song or dance or art or video or music, and some wonderful ways of talking about how we want the future to be. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member for Indi. The question is the document be noted, and I call the member for... Sorry? The call for member for...